Entrepreneurs aren't born, they're brewed. You are now listening to the Entrebrewer Podcast with your host, Adam McChesney. Let's grow!
Welcome to the Entrebrewer Podcast. I am your host, Adam McChesney, and I want to thank you for being here. We are live today from Half Coast Studios here in St. Louis, Missouri. Thank you to Half Coast for this amazing setup and sponsoring the show. If you are looking to start your podcast or take your current one to the next level, then you need to check out what these guys are doing. Contact them today for a free consultation. If you're listening, please be sure to subscribe to the show and leave us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. We would love for you to share this on social media by tagging me, and this way we can get this incredible content out to more people. Today is an episode that I've been excited for, and it features our first female guest. I have known her for almost a year now at this point, and what she's accomplished during that time has been pretty incredible, which we'll get into here in a little bit. When we first met, we were both franchisees at Hite Digital and still are today, and since then have worked together in a larger capacity as she has now co-founded and created what is now Hite Creative. My guest today is Tatiana Chamorro. She is the owner-partner of Hite Digital Dallas and co-founder of Hite Creative. She is also involved in real estate with her husband, Carlos. Originally from Nicaragua, Tatiana and her family live in Dallas. Tatiana, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Super excited to have you on here today. So for our guests that are listening for the first time, or if you're just getting a refresher, or if you're an avid listener, we certainly appreciate that. The process of this show, Entrebrewer, is we're going through the journey of our guests, and we're comparing that to that of the brewing process. So we'll go through a couple different kind of aspects of the beer process to the entrepreneurial journey. But Tatiana, start off with your history. Kind of tell us who you are, where you come from, and what exactly it is that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited. Feel honored to be the first female guest. A little bit about my history. So I grew up in Nicaragua. I was born in Costa Rica, actually grew up in Nicaragua, and I completed, my husband and I came to Texas about 8 years ago. And he was coming to do his master's. And after completing his master's, we ended up staying. We feel blessed to call Texas our home. It felt very, God-sent, because it just kind of started evolving. We were coming just for the master's, ended up staying. And during that time, I finished my undergrad in communications and marketing, and then went on to do my master's. Just right when I was finishing my master's, I decided to join the franchise. So I was actually one of the first franchisees to join. And the franchise model, was just very, very interesting to me. So a little bit about ourselves. I've been married for 10 years. We have 2 kids, a boy and a girl. And I've always wanted to I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've always been looking for okay, what does that look like, right? What do I need to take on to do that? But also at the same time, balance my life as a mom. So.
That's awesome. And I love how you talk about, obviously that you knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur, but you really wanted to obviously focus on the bigger picture as well, the work-life balance. And I think it's a lot of things that people struggle with or don't necessarily know. So before we get into some of the other stuff, talk about what you've been able to do in terms of creating a work-life balance and what that's been able to do for you and your family.
Yeah, I think as entrepreneurs, if you're an entrepreneur, that you have all these ideas. Like even today, I think every day I get a new business idea. It's just an exciting part, right? You see how things function and you're like, oh, that could work better. And so one of the toughest things of being an entrepreneur is you're always having these sparks of how things and new business models and, how to make that work out. And so the first thing I wanted to do was just focus on one idea that I wanted to make sure that I balance my time, right? Because if you don't do that, then the work-life balance doesn't exist. And the problem with that is that you love doing so much and so many different things and having so many ideas that you find yourself on a Saturday thinking on how this business idea could work out, and then you don't have time to be with your family, right? So my first step towards achieving that was just focusing on one idea. So once I decided this is what I'm going to do, I gave my 100% to that. That meant, okay, where do I want to go 5 years from now, right? That my husband and I, we always sit down and we plan 5 years ahead. And that's very important for us because that tells us what we're going to be focusing on and where we're actually going to be putting our efforts. That really helped us achieve that balance because we're able to set goals that may be long-term, right? But setting those goals allow us to also know that on a Saturday we can rest and maybe spend time with the kids or do family activities or even vacation time.
Yeah, it's incredible. I like how you and Carlos have done that together, right? And so you guys plan together, you guys are in business together, but that's really important when it comes to the overall aspect of that work-life balance, of having that consistency, that as much as it can be inconsistent in terms of what you're doing on a daily basis because we are entrepreneurs, but keeping the holistic, consistent approach is really important. So that's always great to hear and understand, why it's so important and what your why is behind that. One of the next things that we'll talk about here on the Entrepreneur Podcast is talking about the ingredients of what has really came to fruition to make you successful as an entrepreneur, just like great beers have ingredients that are most important to the overall success of it. So what are 3 things that have made you successful in your journey thus far?
I would say that one of the things that I'm also implementing now as a mom, I remember being, since young, being put in situations that were somewhat uncomfortable in terms of like being in front of crowds, speaking an engagement, or being in front of board of directors, giving, reports, or being in the debate club. And so since young, I've always put myself in situations where having an argument and being able to communicate ideas and part of my training as a communicator has been very crucial to how I develop as an adult, as an entrepreneur, as a professional. I think that part has been crucial to me as I grow, but also as a mom, right? And so being able to find myself in situations where they're uncomfortable by nature. Like I think the last situations that I put myself in was speaking in front of 900 people at a conference in real estate about digital marketing, right? So even though I was nervous, I knew that that's the next step I wanted to take. And if I don't get out of my comfort zone, I won't really find, the better me 5 years from now. So intentionally putting myself in situations that aren't comfortable, that I need to, prepare myself for. Setting those goals is going to be huge, but finding someone that also supports you through that. So people talk about, having a partner. When I say partner, it could be a friend, it could be your mom, it could be your sister, anyone that keeps you accountable for those goals, right? So speaking about them out loud is one thing that I always do. You'll always see me sharing these ideas that I have that may happen 3 years from now or a year from now, but I'm saying them out loud because I'm not saying it for the person that's listening. I'm saying it for myself, right? And saying it out loud keeps me accountable, but having that other person, in my case, it's my husband, where we share these ideas and we tag along through that journey, right? Because we got married when I was 20 and he was 23, there were a lot of things where we needed to tag along. While he was doing his master's, I was, helping out in the house. Then I was doing my undergrad and he was helping me with the kids. Then I was doing my math. And so we were tagging along through these goals. But the biggest part of that is that we communicated where we wanted to go so that we would, make ourselves accountable, but also support ourselves through that journey. And I think tied to that would be, don't do it by yourself. Like, this is not a lonely journey, and it doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be. I think that has been the biggest decision in my case, when I decided to become a franchise. One of the things that I like to say is people ask me, well, Hite is not your last name. So why would you change the business and the brand that you build? And I always say my ego was smaller than my purpose. So my purpose was bigger than my ego, right? So for me, it's about the bigger purpose. Where do I want to go? And why am I getting there? And there's different ways in which you can get
there. That's what's powerful. There's a lot of really key things that you mentioned in there, from manifestation to obviously having a partner that helps you, be on your mission, that holds you accountable. And then obviously like really focusing on your bigger purpose. And I think that oftentimes people they might know their purpose, but they get disconnected from it. And they try to go down their own path and they try to be that lonely entrepreneur that it's just not possible. to be able to do that. You need a support system, regardless of who it is. You need a support system to be, to be there for you and to help you along the way, which is great. So in the next part of the Entrebrewer process, we like to talk about the overall brewing process within a beer and comparing that to some of the ups and downs of your entrepreneurial journey. So talk about kind of what that journey has looked like over the course of your time as an entrepreneur, and what are some of the highs and what are some of the lows throughout?
Yeah, I would say that in my case, my story began right when the pandemic started. And so that created a complexity in itself that's unusual, right? So I remember finishing my master's, both of my kids at home, my husband was working at home, and then opening my business. So just the second I decided to open my business, networking was, not something that was happening during COVID. So I started to get creative in ways in which I could find clients. And one of the things that I started to do was reach out to relationships I had been building over the past years, just going back to setting those goals. I knew my goal since I was maybe 20 that I wanted to be a business owner. So since I've been 20, I've been building relationships. And the first thing I did was reach out to people that I had already been spoken to, that I had already shared, hey, I'm going to open my business, that they already knew what I was working towards, right? So that's one of the first struggles that I saw. The second is scalability. I'm gonna touch on scalability because I usually say we talk about this fear of becoming a business owner and then thinking about, well, I need to pay my salary and then pay my employee's salary, and how am I going to balance this time? And then I also need to close my clients, and then I also need to fulfill. But that's usually what we are aware of. Nobody really talks about, okay, that's going to happen because you set your mind, and that's going to be based on the effort you put in. What about when you have 20 clients? What about when that starts growing? That's a whole different monster, and people don't talk about it, right? And so to me, it's been not a struggle, but a challenge to be able to keep my balance, my mental health, my happiness, my connection with my kids, while scaling two businesses. And both of them have been growing. They have been growing hand on hand. So another complexity there has been making sure that I prioritize one over the other when it needs to be prioritized, right? Like, how do I balance communication on both aspects of the business? How do I ensure customer service on both sides of the business? How do I ensure things are happening the way they should be happening as we keep growing, right? So I would say that scalability is going to be kind of like that part of the journey that everyone wants to come to, but nobody really talks about. I am a note taker. So I have like Post-its, they're color coded. I have pens that are also color coded. And I use that to identify like high priority, low priority. And I think note taking has really been an art that I have developed that has allowed me to be able to prioritize certain things over others, and also a lot of mental strength. So if I know that today I'm going to be working on Hite Creative, I block myself just for Hite Creative. Right. And same thing on a Saturday. If I am with my family, I block myself for my family, but it really is a mental strength game.
And I love that you touched on so much there, because there's a lot to unpack. And that was going to be one of my next questions, is how do you differentiate between Hite Creative and Hite Digital Dallas? Because for our listeners, like when she talks about these two different businesses that kind of started almost back to back, and that they're growing, like they're growing an insane amount. And so this isn't just like a side hustle that's kind of turning into a business. So I wanted you to kind of like talk about a little bit further, because I think that a lot of people that are listening, they either have multiple businesses or they're interested in getting into multiple businesses. But what has been some of the things that you've done to actually figure out prioritization on, like, do you have it set by the day, by the time period? Like, what does that look like in terms of prioritizing one business over the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that the model for Hite Creative began as I had always been, I have experience in branding. Those are the services that I had been selling. And so I began as a franchisee, being my own client. So I always make this joke about the meme where it's Spider-Man looking at Spider-Man. I kind of felt like that when I was getting started, because anything that needed to be fixed in the process, me as a franchisee would have to reach out, to my own team. And so that made it complex, but also beautiful because it allowed me to understand the needs on the side of the franchises on the types of services. I think a big part that I have done is delegation. I am by nature a very nitpicky person. Like I'm very, oriented by details. And so detail oriented. And so one of the things that has been hard is delegating, because I can get it, and this is something that I think happens to all of us as entrepreneurs. Like, I can get it done faster and better. So just let me do it, But one of the hard things, and also the beautiful things, has been to delegate tasks and to see my team members grow and just see them empower themselves and take the lead on different projects. And it is such a hard process. It sounds very simple because we're talking about watching our team member grow, but that growth is so hard. It takes a lot of mentorship, a lot of time. So I actually prioritize my time on things that can add value to my team members that can then take control of those situations, right? Now, it might be important to mention not everyone has the ability to have the team members immediately, right? So that's something that we also did gradually. But one of the things that I do is that by being able to track the things that we're working on, I can identify the things where we will need, for example, team members. So do we need a new graphic designer? Do we need a new web designer? Do we need a communications person?
No, that's really powerful. And I think that you talked about empowering your team and pouring into them to be able to help fill up the bigger purpose, or fill out the bigger purpose. Because as you mentioned, as entrepreneurs, we normally just want to get the problem done and then move on to the next thing, not realizing the ripple effect. If we don't fix or delegate or document or automate or whatever that one thing is that keeps holding us up over and over and over again, we're going to continue having to put our hands in the pie when we're not needing to necessarily do that. So I thought that was really cool that you mentioned that. And, I've obviously seen that firsthand of what it has done as the team has grown, as more people are taking on bigger roles, which has been phenomenal. So the next part of the process that we talk about is the fermentation or conditioning within the beer. So if you think about a beer, this is the part where you wait to see the final result of what the beer looks like and figure out what needs to be changed in order to tweak it to make it a little bit better. So what is the biggest lesson that you have learned in your entrepreneurial process that you would share with someone that says, hey, Tatiana, I'm looking to save years worth of mistakes. What's the one thing that you can teach me to get me above the fold?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson has been on automation and scalability. You need to think 10 years from now, not a year from now. You need to think about when you have those 80 clients, not when you have those 5. 5 is a number that you can easily handle. And obviously the process and the service needs to match quality. But think about when you get to 100, because that's when you get to 100 gradually, it's too late to now think on 100. And so you need to be thinking about that since the beginning, even though it feels like you may think I'm never going to get there. Why do I need to focus my time on that? The reality is that the decisions you make in your business and how you automate certain processes will influence how good and how fast you can get to those 100 clients.
I think the aspect that you've been kind of hitting on multiple times of really scalability, but automation plus scalability. I think it's so tough for business owners to actually take the time to get serious about planning for that scalability. I know I've done a really bad job, done more so better now, but used to do a really bad job of forecasting what the future looked like. One, because I didn't know where I wanted to go, but 2, I didn't know who I needed in order to help me get there. So what are some things that you do? Because I think that bandwidth of people in your team has been a huge part of growth in both of your businesses. What are some things that you do to actually like plan those things out? And how do you forecast for those things? I think that's a huge issue for entrepreneurs.
Definitely. And I think that it'll depend on what those goals look like. Some people don't want to have 100 clients. So then it's just talking about, okay, how do I get to 20? And that's where I want to, for me, it has been all about finding the right partners, like the right people to have those conversations with. right? So finding your tribe, for, as cliche as that sounds, but it really does make a difference, because I personally, that has been one of the struggles about not thinking on scalability, right? But finding the people that have been there, have done it, and then tell you, you got to think about this, and let me show you why, and let me tell you why, and guide you through it, right? And that's why I'm saying, like, the journey as an entrepreneur is very lonely. Make sure you find your people that are good and well-intentioned and have good, that they can support you through the decisions you're going to make, so that you can have all the tools you need to succeed wherever you want to go, right? For me, in my case, it has been the franchise. So like, I know you and I talk a lot about certain things. I ask you for advice and questions. JC has been a great mentor, so in general, finding the people that have been there, understand the struggles I'm going through, and can share certain things I can apply through that journey.
Yeah. I mean, you hit it right there on the head. I think that being lonely, you don't have to do it. It's going to happen. But if you have your tribe of people and you have those partners, you have those mentors, it's really important. So awesome to hear you kind of touch on that. The last thing that we'll talk about in part of the Entrebrewer process, we talk about the distribution. So with beer, that's taking the beer to market and selling it. What is next for Tatiana, the future? I know you guys have a lot going on in businesses and things like that. So what's next for you?
Yeah, so currently I am doing a merger. So I am going to have someone else come in and step in as GM for my digital agency. We have our team scaling at Hite Creative, and I have seen the team just shining. So I'm going to start focusing on doing consulting for creative agencies that want to scale. I'm going to start doing public speaking and making sure that I start supporting agencies that want to scale, specifically for creative agencies, because there's a disconnect between how agencies can grow through services that are one time, right, as opposed to recurring. So kind of sharing more about my experience and what I have learned and tools that they can use and apply as well. Yeah,
that's incredible. I think that's, when you talk about your creative, branding and things like that, you have the knowledge and experience, but I can tell every time you talk about it, it just excites you. So that's really cool to hear that you're going to be involved in impacting more people. I think impact is always something that we're trying to figure out how to do as entrepreneurs. And I think that this route definitely kind of sets you up for what you're passionate about and what makes, you wake up every single morning and, get excited about things, which is awesome. Well, that kind of finishes up everything here today. Tatiana, really appreciate you having you on here as a guest today. One, where can people find you? And then two, do you have anything else that you'd like to share with our audience before heading out?
Yeah, so they can find me on LinkedIn or Instagram, or even Facebook, and I'll share the links with you. Tatiana Chamorro is how you can find me. One thing that I would touch base on, we have a leadership coach, and he talks a lot about commitments and finite purposes versus infinite purposes. And I encourage everyone to think of that, because sometimes as entrepreneurs, we put ourselves the goal of finishing or growing a business. What we really should be focused on is what is our infinite purpose. For me, particularly, when I began my journey, my commitment was to serve others. And most recently, I have decided to transform that commitment into, I want to be a person that invests in people so they can live their dreams. And so what that means is investment, whether it is monetarily or with time or whatever that looks like. I am really committed to making sure that people can find whatever they're passionate about and leave their dream following that, right?
That's incredible. And yeah, no, I definitely think everyone needs to have a commitment, something that literally just lights them on fire and gets them excited. And it's really cool to see that you had one, but you're shifting that based on everything that you've kind of gone through and kind of where you want to go, which is really important. So I'm glad you kind of finished up in touch with that. As Tatiana mentioned, we'll have her links in the show notes. Feel free to reach out to her. She is a very creative, branding oriented mind that has a lot of really amazing things that she's working on and will continue to do so. So Tatiana, thank you again for coming on here today. And I want to thank our audience for tuning in to another podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, download, and share our content. Leaving a 5-star review goes a long way. And thank you again to Half Coast Studios. If you're here in St. Louis and looking to start your podcast or take your current one to the next level, then you seriously need to check out what they have going on. We'll see you next week. And remember, entrepreneurs are not born, they are brewed.
I'm an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs on born, they're brewed. Thank you for listening to Entrebrewer Podcast with your host, Adam McChesney. Let's